Hi, this is Michael Waits, and welcome back to India Game Changer. Today we are joined by Arun Bagaria, a co-founder and the CEO of TravClan. Arun, thank you so much for coming on the show. And before we get to the main part of this conversation, can you please give our listeners a little bit of your background for some context?
Sure. Thank you so much, Michael, for having me here. Super excited to have joined this conversation. A bit about myself. I've basically been born and brought up in Bombay, come from a business family, then did my BCom, then did my MBA from IIM Bangalore. Since then, since 2014, I've been working primarily with startups. Worked with a couple of great startups, one in the travel space called Travel Triangle. Spent a couple of years there, primarily in business operations, and then joined Cars24, which is in the automobile space, leading new product development for them for a year. And yeah, in 2018, we started TravClan. A little more about me. I enjoy watching football and playing chess. These are a couple of my hobbies.
I love it.
Yeah, so that's about that.
What was it like working at Cars24? I mean, from my knowledge, this is a very fast-growing, very well-funded company, right? And kind of a famous place to be. Was there like an incredible energy there when you were there?
Yeah, absolutely right. So I joined when the company was just a year old, but the company had already grown to 800 people, right?
Yeah.
So speaks a lot about the kind of growth Cars24 had experienced. And fundamentally, I think what Cars24 has gone on to solve is they've created a terrific value proposition at that time for people who were looking to sell their used cars, right? And that came from the fact that the team was super excited about solving the problem. And in India, it is a large problem if you're looking to sell anything. So that was amazing. And then my role was working in product. So just a year old company which has grown so quickly. So working on the product, on the technology aspect, which is where all the action is happening, all
Yeah.
the transactions are happening, the money is flowing. So that was an amazing experience as well.
So do you think you take some of the stuff that you learned at Cars24 and say, oh my God, the travel industry probably has like similar problems, or are you solving some kind of different problem in the travel industry?
I would say that some of the problems are very similar in the sense that essentially when Cars24 started, they were solving sourcing of cars for dealers, right? So we're doing very similar in TravClan, wherein we are solving sourcing of travel products for travel agents. So that is something where the value proposition or the offering is similar. And more than that, I think one thing which I learned at Cars24 is the advantage of having a bias towards action. A lot of times when you're doing things and you're
Yeah.
working on, you don't really know what's going to work and what's not going to work. So the question really at Cars24 everyone used to ask was what it takes to test it out in a small way, or to try and see and get real feedback from customers, right? So that's something from an approach perspective we learned. When we sort of take it a step ahead, Cars24 always had this approach of, what best we can do. Can we, if dealers have a challenge in coming and picking the cars from our centers, can we deliver it right to their doorstep,
Right.
right? So mindset of, building it from a customer first perspective, I think that's something which applies not just to travel, but to every industries.
I agree. Do you feel like you were destined to run your own business at some point? Like you say, you come from a business family, and I presume when you say that, you don't mean that like your dad worked at a bank and your mom worked, at an investment bank. Normally, when you say a business family, it means your family runs their own business or runs like a business with the uncles and cousins and stuff like that. Do you think you're always destined to do this?
Um, I think yes, partly because everyone in my family is either running their business or is a chartered accountant, which is a traditional path. But after that, they started their own chartered accountancy firm. They
Right.
never ended up working at like a big four, Ernst and Young, and so on and so forth. Right. So my brother as well, right? He's a chartered accountant and he runs his own advisory firm.
I love it.
So growing up, yes, I did think about, starting something of my own at some point of time. But I think in this journey, right, of working with different startups, what I really understood is that, while starting up is great, before one starts up, he needs to know, like one needs to know why they are doing this,
Yeah.
right? And that why is goes beyond, what problem you're solving or what industry you're in, but sort of relates to at the core what you really want to gain from it, right? Like because entrepreneurship, big or small, takes the same amount of effort. Like I've seen my dad put in that amount of effort.
Right.
And if you don't have that sense of purpose or clarity as to why you're doing this, it can be really difficult and lonely at times as well, right? Like
Yeah.
you need to keep figuring out those answers. So, yeah, I do think that it was destined, but not necessarily. I thought that, in this shape and form, I'll be doing this with these co founders or in this industry. So that's something I think you uncover as life progresses.
As you go along. But I do think it's really important, like just to use your terminology. I think there's a small why, right? The small why is we want to do this thing, we want to solve this problem. But the big why is more important. That's the thing that gets you up in the morning, right? And you must have read Simon Sinek's book, right? It starts with why, which is a good starting point for understanding this. But if we do dig deep into this, what motivates you thing, which you just mentioned, what exactly is it, right? What about the travel business? What about TravClan is the thing that motivates you to get up every day and to do this thing?
Yeah, I think, very important, right? Like, because what motivates us or what motivates me, two things, right? Like, first is I think when I look at what I enjoy doing more is when I was able to make an impact, right? Like,
Yeah.
so impact here for me personally simply means that if I can see a correlation between the input and the output, right? Like the output may not be very instant. It may come in 2 months later or at times even 2 quarters later. But I think if we can see that impact in people's lives, and we are a tech company, so we want to leverage tech as much as possible to make sure that the lives of our users are improving because of the technology that we are building.
Yeah.
I think that is at the core of what motivates us when we so just to give you a little more context about what we do as a company.
Please.
So basically, what we do is we help travel agents grow their business, right? So in a nutshell, what we do is we sort of help them, digitize their entire business, create a website for them, help them with marketing tools to generate more traffic on their website. And in today's day and age, when people think about travel agents, people think that nobody is using travel agents anymore, which actually is not true.
Right.
You know, 75% of travel is still being booked through travel agents, right? It is a set of people who sort of seem to have been forgotten, or people have sort of assumed that they're not using technology. But there is actually an opportunity if you sort of give them the right tools, they can actually grow their business as well.
How do you figure that out, right? Here's the other thing. I think we talked about this offline a couple of weeks ago. Everybody like buys a house, rents an apartment, has a place to live, right? And
Right.
and so many people. I live in Bangkok. I feel like every third person in Bangkok is a real estate agent. That's not a joke. I really feel like that's the thing. And then I feel like a lot of the technologists that come to Bangkok are like, I know, I'll solve this problem with the real estate agents. And like 75,000 people are trying to build. It sounds like what you're building for travel agents, and yet I haven't heard of anybody building this thing. So
Right.
what was it like? Are you a big traveler? Was your mom and dad big travelers? Like, what was it about this where you said, "Oh, no one is work," because it doesn't seem like anybody else is working on this, at least not where I live. What was the aha moment for you where you're like, "Oh my God, they need the same thing that kind of every real estate agent needs. We can build that."
This started in 2014 when I joined a company called Travel Triangle, which is essentially a B2C marketplace for people going on a holiday,
Okay,
right? So I was working in the travel industry for a couple of years, where on a weekly, monthly basis, I was personally interacting with, close to 200, 250 travel agents. So I understood at the core, right, like what are the challenges that they faced, right? So Travel Triangle was solving one problem for them, which was essentially generating leads for these travel agents and passing leads of customers to them. But in these interactions, what I identified that these travel agents do have leads, or they do have a set clientele, and they grow their business through repeat and word of mouth referral clientele.
right.
But what they really struggle is with supply, right? So that's the second part of the problem that we solve,
What does that mean?
right? So supply here means that, as a travel agent, I have a customer who wants to book a hotel in Bangkok. How
Yep,
do I book it for that customer?
yep,
I have a customer who wants to, let's say, go to Universal Studios in Singapore. How do I book that activity?
right.
I have a customer who wants to do scuba diving in Bali. How do I do that? Right. So there is,
I want to do
as a
all of these things, by the way, but go ahead.
yeah. So essentially, if I look at my own, experience, right? Every time you travel, you want to do more and more, and you want
Yeah,
to do different things, right? Like people travel so that they can experience the culture and, have more and different experiences, right? So what we realized is that, the world is evolving, technology is evolving, but the role of a travel agent also needs to evolve, right? From
Yeah.
just do flight booking or hotel booking to sort of advising you on what you should be doing,
Yeah.
right? So that was really, where we saw that, hey, look, if I go to TripAdvisor, I'm still looking for advice. If I
Exactly.
go to Expedia, I'm still looking for advice in the shape of form of like going through those reviews and ratings. As humans, we want to trust, we want to make decisions. Most of us want to make decisions based on other people's experiences and recommendations.
Right. Because otherwise we're making a decision in a vacuum, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's where, we knew that a travel agent is, or a travel consultant, right? Like as it's called in the US and Europe, if we can sort of give them the right tools and help them upskill themselves, they're going to be able to add a lot of value to people's travel plans and their purchase decisions, right? So that is really what motivated us. Unfortunately, there was no one single moment which I can call as epiphany that, hey, this is where we know that we need to do this.
Yeah.
uh, it sort of was always intuitive to us that, hey, look, there is this problem. There is like $500 billion of travel being sold through travel agents.
Wow.
What do we really do? So the first starting point for us was actually, what our friends would ask us, hey, we want a deal. Do you have a good deal, right? Like, and especially, in India, everyone's looking for a good deal,
I think
right?
in every country, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. We said that, hey, look, customers need deals. And we know like suppliers, like hotels, have unsold inventory. So if we create a platform where we get these deals and give it to travel agents, we did not do it as B2C. We still wanted to focus on the travel agent community.
Yeah.
These travel agents will be able to sell these deals. So that's what we, first started with. That was like, hey, let's try this out. If we can do this, obviously we can expand. But that was really, the moment when we started out, when we were just moved out of our jobs. That's the first, pilot we did. And that's when we knew that, hey, we are onto something.
How do you build? Because there's so much noise out there, right? Particularly today. If you go back 20 years ago, I want to give you an experience that I had in the travel business, and it kind of changed the way I thought about the way things worked. A buddy of mine was constantly coming to Bangkok. We both lived in Tokyo, and he was constantly coming to Bangkok to buy round the world airline tickets. And he had a travel agent that he trusted, literally like on the third floor of the Emporium Mall on Sukhumvit Road. And he was like, "Look, go to her, and then you can buy these really cheap business class tickets." But I never would have been able to find her. And frankly, I wouldn't have trusted her even if I did find her, right? Because it's on the third floor, literally like in the back of the mall somewhere. But now that everything's digital, everybody's filled with all this information, right? Like I can go to Traveloka or Travelocity or all these things. And to be fair, I kind of don't trust the ratings. Do you know what I mean? Because those can be gamed as well. But I do trust when I talk to a person because I consider the travel agent, I think you make a really good point. They should almost be like a travel concierge, right? Like I want to go to Singapore, but tell me a great Italian restaurant that I'm not going to find on my own. That's maybe in Chinatown on Amoy Street kind of thing. And then
Right.
what should my kids do when they're there? That would be awesome, right? And if you're giving them those tools, that's insane because now I can trust them and now I don't have to do all the work myself, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. Pretty much that's what, like I mentioned, right? Like every time you travel, right? Like your expectations of you want to experience more and more, right? And
Yeah.
that's when people sort of move from being, like a tourist to actually traveling. Like you said, that, technology, what it allows us is to sort of bring all of these different pieces of content, right? Like from hotels to restaurants to, let's say, activities you could be doing, right, onto a single platform. So that's what we are essentially doing, right? And at the outset, right, like what we believe that there will be, not just hundreds but thousands and, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who would sort of become or grow into becoming these travel concierge, like
Yeah.
the word you use, right?
Yeah.
And what really makes sense is that, they will be best suited to serve the customers because they have that personal connect. They have, the trust. And what we are best suited as a company is to ensure that when people are actually traveling, they have a excellent experience, which means like when you're actually, in Singapore, how do you ensure that the pickup happens on time? The restaurant that you go to, there is a reservation for you. You don't end up waiting. And when your kids are going for this activity, and let's say you want to enjoy something else, how do you ensure that both happen? And you're not worried about, hey, my kids are in a different, like, in a new country. How do I manage that? So these are the things that we go on to solve. So we don't build just the tech stack wherein, we've given them a platform, but we sort of also ensure that whatever gets booked gets delivered and executed flawlessly, right? And that's super powerful.
The concept of building a microsite for every agent is actually great, right? It's actually not that hard to do, but giving it to them for free is actually super helpful because most agents are never going to be able to build it themselves.
Right.
But is there a way to do this too? Not just like an itinerary is the wrong way to say this, right? But if I book something with my travel concierge through TravClan, right? Because TravClan's the back end, so it's probably not even branded on the site, right? It's just, it sits in the back, it's powered by TravClan, which I kind of recommend you put on the site, but if you don't, you probably already do. But here's the thing I want to know. If I'm a customer, if I'm the C part in this B2B to C experience, right? Can I log in as well and see my full itinerary? Like, do I get a place there where I can do that too? So it's not just the travel agent that can see it, but like when I'm in Singapore and my wife says to me, hey, what are the kids supposed to be doing today? And what time is it? I'm like, oh, I left that piece of paper at home. Can I log in as well?
Yeah, you absolutely can, right?
I
So
love it.
that's where, our experience of having worked in B2C companies, right? We sort of understand the anxieties people have when they're actually traveling themselves, right? So one
Yeah.
of the things that we place a lot of emphasis on, and, post COVID, this has become, extra critical,
Yeah.
is making sure that when the traveler is actually traveling, he should have access to all the details, right? Right from the confirmation numbers to the itinerary to the driver details to knowing exactly where the pickup point is, right?
Yeah.
Like you're standing at the airport in a foreign country, you're traveling there for
Some
the first
van
time.
just pops up and you're like,
Yeah,
get in.
yeah.
Really? Right.
And you don't even know where the van is going to stop,
Right.
right?
Right.
So initially, when we started working, right, in 2014, right, like it's just 9 years back, but at that time, WhatsApp and internet voice-based calls were not really
Exist.
popular.
Right.
One of the biggest challenges we used to have is that, people would be traveling, people would be standing on different gates
Yeah.
within the same terminal, right?
Right.
And that's something which, one needs to solve, right? So it's not just about having access where you can log in and see information. It goes much beyond that, right? Like, how do you make that information actionable, right? You know exactly what to do or what to expect, and if something goes wrong, whom to reach out to, because that's one large source of anxiety when you're traveling.
I think this is like a marriage saver for sure. Definitely.
Yeah.
Because the arguments that people have on vacation, they're just like, babe, seriously, you don't have the phone number for the guy that's going to pick us up? Like, how could you not do that? You ruined my vacation. But let me tell you another story. When my first time in Cambodia, so this is a long time ago in 1998, we booked a trip with DTM Travel. Like, I still remember. And the reason why I said like a van just shows up is because a van just showed up at the airport in Cambodia. It was in Siem Reap. And my wife at the time, actually my girlfriend at the time, looked at me and she was like, are those the guys? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, how would I possibly know? But we got in the van anyway. But it was a little bit
Yeah.
disconcerting. They didn't kidnap us or kill us, but it was a little bit disconcerting. But solving that, because this is the thing that nobody else has done yet, I think, not that I've seen, where they're solving it for the business side, but once that's done, all that info dies like on the business side and doesn't go to the customer side.
Right.
That is awesome. That's an awesome idea. Sorry, go ahead. Did I interrupt you? Were you in the middle of saying something? I feel like I
Yeah,
interrupted you.
no, I think both the things that you said, right? Like in terms of, this being a marriage saver. So large part of not necessarily our customers are travel agents, but our customers
Right.
are people who actually, the first time people from a younger generation use a travel agent is when they're going on their honeymoon, right?
Exactly.
And if they do that, they sort of realize that, they always need to know someone they can put the blame on if
Right.
it goes wrong.
And it better not
And
be her
something,
or him, right? Because
yeah,
that's a
yeah.
problem.
Yeah. And similar to what you said, right? So again, when I got married and we were going on our honeymoon, so we landed in Thailand, and we had the same exact experience,
Yeah.
right?
At the
And
airport.
the difference here is that before we got into the cab, the driver requested that, hey, can I take a photo? Because that's what our SOP was, right? So he requested, if you're okay, that,
Yeah.
we just share it that the pickup has been done on time, and it was a proper pickup. And this photo eventually ended up coming back to me because uh, the people whom we were traveling with knew that, hey, this booking is from TravClan, and this TravClan's, team member coming. So I was showing it to my wife at that time that, hey, look, that's how good we are.
It's not my fault.
Yeah.
Oh, I love this. I love this so much. And wait, how long have you been building this, you said?
So it's been 4.5 years. We
Oh,
started
wow.
in
How big is the team
2018.
now?
So we're close to 200 people now. So we've expanded over the last 1 year from being close to 120 people to 200 people now.
It feels easy to start a company when there are 4 people in it. And then maybe you learn along the way, like how to get to 14 people. Once you get to 40 people, it starts to get really tricky. But now you're 200. Like, as the CEO, I'm super curious what you've learned along the way. Because even when you were doing product at Cars 24, and even when you were at your previous travel company, like, you weren't running the whole thing and you're just watching, kind of, right? But now that
Right.
you're in charge of the whole thing, what are some of the biggest challenges and problems that you had, and what have you learned along the way?
Firstly, I agree that, running a 4 or a 14 people company is very different from running a 200 people company.
Yeah.
I think some of the biggest learnings that I've had is that, as you're growing as a company, especially in a context like ours where, close to 50% of people have joined in just the last 1 year,
Yeah.
it's really important to sort of keep evolving and growing the culture that you're trying to build,
Right.
right? And some of the biggest challenges that we have sort of faced as a company is that we've not always got it right, in terms of setting the right expectations, right? Like, given that we are in the travel and hospitality sector, we tend to have customers traveling throughout the year 24/7.
Yeah.
So making sure that people understand that the nature of the work is such that things like these can happen at any point of time. More importantly, I think what is really important is, when you're building a company, right, big or small, as founders, you tend to have a North Star metric beyond just the business metrics,
Yeah.
right? Like your revenue or sales and things like that. But in terms of why you're really doing this, I think what's important is how well you're able to communicate this to people who are looking to, join, and
Yeah.
when they join, because that's when people sort of truly understand that if they're at the right place, or if whatever they personally aspire to, that's one. And second, I would say, is how do you make sure that, so I think this is just more got to do with culture. And second is, I think, how do you build a team which sort of feels empowered to make more and more decisions on their own and have that same action towards bias, which I was mentioning, I saw at Cars 24. I think these are two things which personally I feel are things which I have learned a lot,
Yeah.
right? These are things which we not always got it right. We had a phase of COVID for 1.5 years where, we were the same number of people for at 50, close to 55 people for, we went into COVID at 55 head count. 1.5 years later, we were again around at 55 head
Right.
count. So as founders, we got very hands-on at that time. And when we sort of started growing, we didn't realize that our approach needs to evolve as well, right? So these are some of the learnings which we had. How do you find that balance between being involved versus making sure that people are able to run the show as well?
It's the biased action thing, which is famously a Jeff Bezos tenet, right, from Amazon. It's actually really important, and frankly, I think it's one of the keys to building a company from scratch. You just have to do something, really, and in a way, you have to just do anything at the beginning, because if you do nothing, then you're doing nothing, and you learn nothing, and you grow in no particular way at all.
Right.
I really believe this, and it's so hard to explain, like, why that's so important. You know, Nike had this commercial that said, "Just do it," and it kind of resonated with me from the beginning, because it's like, you're either going to play the game or you're not going to play the game, but you're not half playing the game, right? And it's the same
Right.
thing in business, I think, and that's the bias to action. But how do you, what's the right word? How do you imbue that or inculcate that into the company? Like, do you just tell people, like, hey, look, I think I need to do this or that? Just say, look, just try something. This idea that they're not going to get in trouble is also super important, right?
Right.
How do you do that thing, though? How do you teach people that, or how do you make that part of the culture?
Yeah. So very good question, right? So I think when we started out, some of the first few people who joined us were people from our first level of network, people whom we have worked with in the past. So, the
Yeah.
first 10, 15 people, we knew them really
But
well.
that's
They
the
sort
easy
of had
part,
a,
though, right?
yeah, that's the easy
That's
part,
easy.
right? So one experiment which sort of worked out for us, we had, when I look at the composition of the first 50 people, there were two sets, right? So the first set was people who had, worked in multiple startups, had like 7, 8, 10 years of experience. And the second set were people fresh out of college, like
Right.
literally in their first,
Yeah.
right? At that time, I would say them the same thing, right? Like, hey, let's do it quickly. But what I identified, right, not just me, but as a team, what we identified is that, not just in India, but from a society standpoint, right? What we learn growing up is doing our best, right? And best is measured very highly in terms of quality of work, right? And just to give you a simple example, right? Like
Please.
as a parent, someone will tell their child that, hey, they should be coming first or they should be getting 90 out of 100,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
98 out of 100, but yeah, fair enough.
98, yeah, these days it's 98, right? So I started explaining to people that, hey, at TravClan, it's not about getting 98, right? It's definitely not about that. I used to ask them this question that if you study for 2 hours for a subject, how much marks would you score? And
Right.
how much would marks you would score if you studied for 4 to 8 hours? And how many hours you would need to study if you wanted to come first in the class, right? So people would give their marks and range, and then I would tell them that, hey, fast really means that studying for those 4 to 8 hours, which gets you 80% marks.
Right.
So let's get to that and then figure out what to do next, right? Like instead of saying that, hey, we have to just do it fast, people don't really know what that means,
Yeah,
right?
they
So we
don't.
sort of have to explain to them that what you're being measured against is how quickly you started executing on something. Are you learning from doing what you're doing? And then are you iterating, right? So we really changed our evaluation, and we have like a monthly feedback as well, right? So we changed that to being more and more got to do with, if we, thought of an idea, was some basic version of it something we could make live today or tomorrow? Did we sort of implement that?
There's so many ways to explain this. I mean, when I was at UBS for a year, one of the things they talked about a lot was the Pareto principle, right? Like 20% of your effort is going to create 80% of your outcome. And if you, as soon as you understand that, it really is like an epiphany, right? This power law, the power law distribution. And once you understand this stuff, it makes it so much easier. And yet you're right. In most cases, most kids are not taught that by their parents. They're literally taught, and I was joking before, like it should be a 98. And if you come home with a 98, the typical tiger parent would say, what happened to the other 2 points? So fair enough. But building that culture actually is interesting when you have really experienced people and then just new grads, right? Because there's this massive imbalance with experience and with knowledge. And if you can accomplish that, that's a really cool thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it actually worked out pretty well for us because one thing we learned is that people fresh out of college didn't really have any biases.
Yeah.
So,
In a way, right?
for them, for some of them at least, what they saw at the company is they extrapolated to that's how it should be everywhere.
Right, right. Which is a good outcome.
Yeah.
Do you have, and I don't normally ask statistics, but I'm just trying to get a sense for one thing so I can ask another question as a follow on. How many how many travel agents are there in India? And to be fair, TravClan really could be used by travel agents everywhere in the world, right? So it's not just an Indian product, yeah?
Yeah. So actually, there are like close to 2.5, 3 lakh travel agents just in India alone,
So what is a
right?
lakh for people that don't know?
Sorry, so close to 250,000 travel agents in India.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you think, and this is the reason why I asked, and this is the reason why I had insurance on my brain. I do I do 2 podcasts on insurance, the Asia InsurTech podcast and InsurTech Amplified. And I'm constantly hearing this idea that there's not enough distribution for insurance products in
Right.
Asia and in India included. Do you think sometimes once you get the agents online, once they get used to using technology to distribute both digital and physical products, right, for travel, that there's a way to also have them distribute insurance, not just to themselves because they're a group, right? So now you can get really lower cost insurance for all of those 250,000 people, but then for their customers as well. And I'm not talking
Right.
just about travel insurance. I'm talking about health, life, stuff like that, where they may or may not have it already. But if I trust you, I may buy another product from you as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely does, right? Pretty much, what you explained is true for India, right? Like, so, when you look at India, right? Like India is a very, very diverse country.
Very.
And, it's not just diverse from, the cultural aspects of it, but people live in tier, like, there is a very large growing segment in tier 2, tier 3 segment cities in India who sort of now are getting at that stages in their lives or in terms of their disposable income where they're thinking about, travel, where they're thinking about healthcare, where they're thinking about insurance, where they're
Yeah.
thinking seriously about education, right? And one of the largest challenge in India, I would say not just in India, but many of the developing economies, is that everything happens on trust, but there
Yeah.
is a large deficit,
Yep.
right? What that means is that I want to do more and more business with someone that I trust, but I generally don't tend to trust people because of the past experiences that I've had and what I've been taught to not trust people easily,
Completely
right?
agree with you. It's so hard, right? It's like
Right.
I know I need to do that thing, and I keep looking at that thing. And I did this with my own insurance, to be fair. This is a true story. I was like, I just don't trust the people that are trying to sell it to me. And then when I met an agent that I did trust, literally through a friend, who's like, you can trust
Right.
this lady, I was like, okay, now I can actually buy it. I could ask her all the questions, and I believed everything she
Right.
said to me.
Yeah, no. So that's how travel agents grow their business as well, right? And in terms of them expanding their base, so a lot of these travel agents, especially in tier two, tier three cities, right? They're essentially looking for a better way to live their lives and earn a
Yeah.
better livelihood,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So if them investing 2, 3, 5 weeks of their time learning about insurance, right, helps them earn that extra money
Yeah.
and also add value to the lives of their customers
Yep.
because typically people will not be traveling every week or every month, right?
Right.
Like people would
Right.
travel once in a quarter, once in 6 months, or if it's a leisure trip, it would be even less frequency, right?
Right.
So as an agent, I want to have more and more ways that I can stay connected to my customer. It's the
Yeah.
same family, right? So if I can, add value to the life of this family by saying that, hey, there is this insurance policy and this is how it's going to, cover for your healthcare or, help you save for a rainy day or things like that, or solve for any, exigencies, people will buy it, right?
I
And the
think so.
challenge with insurance in India is that there is very less knowledge,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And this is something which, does involve, like a personal advice, and you need to trust the source that the advice is coming from. Both are critical. So that's where, these travel agents can play a role. And some of the travel agents, that we work with in India, like who come from, smaller towns and cities, they do not just insurance, but they help you with loans as well.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, they should be a fintech to begin with, but that's a different story altogether, right? Because they have the connections with
Yeah,
the
and
people, and
some of
people
them
trust them.
are.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And it's crazy that, some of them started their business by just doing mobile recharges, right? That's where, they build that trust because 10 years back, you had to go to a shop to get your mobile recharge. Today we do it through the internet and so on and so forth. But that's where, they sort of built that trust because people were coming to their shop, getting their mobile recharges.
I love it.
And there are lots of other things which go into play, right? Like credit is a huge thing in India,
Yep.
right? So that's again something which has sort of helped these travel agents build their network.
I want to ask you one more fun question before I let you go.
Sure.
The outcome of travel, whether it's business travel, whether it's one-day travel, or whether it's leisure travel, like you just said, the
Right.
outcome of all these travels is a story.
That's correct.
It just is, though. Shouldn't you have your
Yeah.
own show? Shouldn't you have your own show where, like, when people come back from traveling, you just have them tell their best travel story, and then you publish it as like not sponsored by, but like supported by TravClan. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah,
it
yeah.
encourages more people to travel and more people to tell stories, and it feeds off itself. And then you ask them like how they booked it. They booked it on Trav, like all this kind of stuff. You have to do this, no?
Yeah. So probably I'll start with having a good host for the show.
You would be an amazing host for the show.
I'm not sure about that,
Anyway, just
yeah,
something to think about. Okay, pal,
yeah,
I will let you go.
definitely.
I will let
Yeah,
you go. Arun Bagaria, co-founder and the CEO of TravClan. This has been a blast for me. I hope you had fun as well. Thank you
yeah,
very
yeah.
much.
I did as well. Thank you so much.